Good afternoon, everybody. It's been a while since I posted a video, and part of that is due to my schedule. The last video I posted, I turned around and immediately, well, not immediately after, but immediately after I had to start studying for a midterm, which I thought was much less difficult than advertised. With the practice quizzes. And that had me really freaked out about it. I went in, it was fewer questions than I was expecting, and I did really well on it, so there's that. Then I got sick. Well, actually, I was actually sick when I went to take the midterm. That was not fun. And today is the last day of my spring break. So that's basically what I've been doing since the last video was posted. I did get a couple of videos recorded earlier in the week with a better quality camera. Unfortunately, there seems to be some formula between video quality and file size that makes the router just randomly die when I try to upload things. And since there's only one computer in the house hardwired to the router, and that computer is basically non-functioning because we don't have a monitor that works with it, I'm having to go wireless. I'm going to have to re-record a couple of videos. But before I do that, I wanted to hop on the bandwagon with this 20 questions about d20 thing. So shall we get started? Question 1. Ability scores generation method. I like to either do a point buy system or give people a pool, which it is a method I really like because it's almost like the array generation method, with 4E, but essentially you tell people this is the number of points you have to choose from. Assign them to your stats accordingly, and I think that works well. Well, I think it works really well, and I think it gives players a little bit more freedom in picking their stats, which they seem to like. I generally don't end up with really overpowered characters. They tend to spread the stats out more. There is one exception of someone who just was pouring points into Constitution, I think. It was either Constitution or Dexterity. And I kind of had to say, okay, you have 20 points in Constitution and 20 points in Dexterity. What class are you playing? Oh, I'm a wizard. Okay. Well, you might want to think about putting some points in Intellect. This is not a video game. Having a lot of hit points is not going to save you. Speaking of hit points, the next question is, how are death and dying handled? In general, with the player characters, death and dying is handled with great care, with one exception, and I will get to that in just a moment. In my opinion, the player characters should never die unless it's a direct result of the characters, or sometimes the players, own bad choices. And by that I mean not listening to the warnings that are being given. I generally don't funnel you from place to place along an adventure. If you want to, if instead of taking the path through the forest to get to the next town, if you want to stop and explore a cave, and the cave has a bunch of beholders in it, or dire bear in it, or just anything that you really shouldn't be fighting with at the first level, you are going to be warned about it in town. Stay away from the cave in the forest. There's something really nasty in there, and I don't think you're quite able to handle it, or you don't look skilled enough to handle it. So, if the players decide to ignore the warnings and go in there, I'm not going to stop them. I'm going to expect them to be reasonable enough to, when they run into that beholder, to just flee, or maybe quietly back out of the cave and hope it didn't see them. There's no reason why they should be dying. Except for their own stupidity. And in that regard, I treat hit points as a measure of how hard you are to kill. So, for me, having 20 hit points, for me that means, okay, when those reach at 0, you are so injured, in so much pain, you cannot move. And when it goes under 0, then a fatal blow has been dealt. Now, I do allow other especially clerics, and druids, and a key, depending on the game, there may be some other classes that can use whatever divine power they have to keep your body alive long enough to get emergency treatment. But they can't do it for very long. If it happens right outside of a town, you're probably going to be okay, because the healer in the party will be able to keep you alive until they get you back to town and get you proper medical attention. If it happens on the middle of an adventure in a cave or something, you're probably gonna die. I'm sad to say. I have only on one occasion set out to actually kill the players. And that was in a very high level game. I think we were almost, or the players were almost level 20 at the time. And instead of, when the adventure that we had just played ended, and things rolled over to me to get the next game going, instead of starting a brand new adventure with brand new characters, people wanted to continue on, or just roll over these characters, and I didn't have a problem with that. I thought it was a great idea. We had level 16, 17 characters, and at the time, one of the other players was joking that it would be easy. Not because all my adventures were easy, but because they were so high level, that once you get to those high levels, you have access to all those spells. It is not easy to fail a lot in combat. And so I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to make things a little tougher. I think I'm going to design these, or design this adventure so that somebody is going to die. And it happened not once. Not one person died on this adventure. Two player characters died on the adventure. One died because his health was very low, and some idiot lit a grease trap on fire. And the other one died a little bit more nobly. A self-sacrificing fatal blow to a dragon. Which I thought was wonderful. At least in terms of, the game and the emotions that it evoked. And it nobody had a problem with it. I'm surprised that, well, almost surprised that they handled things as well as they did. Because it wasn't normal for them at the time to be to be dying like that. I had always sort of erred on the side of caution, and probably made things a little bit too easy. I don't really do that anymore. If someone, unfortunately, over the course of the adventure dies, then depending on the situation, you may be rolling a new character. And yes, I have played adventures where there are people who were supposed to die who ended up dying, and people who weren't supposed to die that wound up dying. Question 3. What about raising the dead? Absolutely. Not so much raising the dead as animating them. That is a necromancer thing. They cast a spell, magic infuses the dead body, gets back up and walks again. Actually returning the dead back to life is quite a bit harder, because I don't believe in sending out a cleric or having, clerics that are capable of casting that spell, or a resurrection spell, as players. It's not available to you. To me, the level of devotion to a god that gives you the ability to do that, that's not something that you find except in monasteries, in temples with sequestered clergy. And part of the reason why you don't find it there is because it is not easy, or why you only find it there is because it's not easy to return someone to life. There are quite a few components that you will actually have to go gather in a certain limit of time. I usually tend to say about 10 days you'll have, excuse me, to return with the materials necessary for a resurrection. And they vary depending on what deity the temple or monastery or clergy is devoted to. But it can be done. And if you don't return within the 10-day limit, sadly, the body has begun to decay to the point where resurrection is no longer possible. And that leaves you with one other option if you really want to get this person back. Reincarnation. But you'll have to go out and acquire a freshly dead body. And I have had players. I have had one game. There was either a rogue or an assassin, I believe, who was trying to reform himself. While the rest of the characters were debating whether it was morally okay to kill someone else to get their friend back, the assassin went out and killed, I think it was a stall vendor, shopkeeper, something like that, and came back with the body, and everyone else was just completely dumbfounded by that. But in the end, the character was resurrected. He got a nice new body, unfortunately a female body. So that made things a little bit more difficult on him, having a body that was not physically capable of doing the things he was used to doing. But it didn't seem to hinder him too much. And it wound up with one of the best role-playing sessions I've ever had. Quite a few of them, actually, came from that game. Question number 4. How are replacement PCs handled? I tend to handle things a little more straightforward and a little less delicately. the when a player character dies, obviously the other members of the party are going to be mourning him somewhat. And depending on the type of game I'm running, a replacement PC could be someone the remaining party members encounter on the way to complete an objective, or they might be someone in town that that you can hire, or that inquires about continuing on the adventure with you. And I don't tiptoe around the issue, really. I expect the players to be aware of the fact that they should be in mourning, except in some very rare circumstances, and handle things accordingly. And they always do. I have never had the one exception where to the rule where nobody mourned anybody's death was a wizard or sorcerer, don't really remember which, in the party who was quite evil actually, and had been manipulating them into doing his dirty work somewhat. So when he died, nobody really felt bad for him. And I think that was a good way to play it. And I mean, like I said, nobody really felt bad for him. But there was one character in the group. And she had a real hard time not coping with his death, but coping with the fact that he died did not matter to her. She felt like she was a horrible person because this evil, manipulative person's life had ended, and she no longer had to deal with him. And she was glad about that. She was unable to really reconcile that with her beliefs that all life is valuable, all life is important. And she ultimately wound up questioning whether she had done as much as she could have to save him, and wound up being very tormented by his death. And from a storytelling aspect, I think that's wonderful. I mean, I think it's also very realistic. Because there are probably people that you didn't much care for, or you don't much care for. And when you find out they die, you're probably just going to shrug and not really be bothered by it. And some people might be bothered by the fact that they aren't bothered by it. I know I would. But that's just me personally. Question number 5. Initiative. Individual, group, or something else? I do group. Initiative. Except in direct one-on-one combat. And for that I mean if a fighter and a gnoll are on the field, right up in each other's face, trading blows, then individual initiative goes. But in most other situations, I go with group or the group average, depending on the situation and the game. Number 6. Are there critical hits and fumbles? How do they work? Yes, there are critical hits and fumbles. I tend to follow the degrees of success. Rolling lower than what you need would be a fumble. Rolling over than what you, or rolling more than what you need would be a success. And rolling right exactly the number that you need, that is a critical hit. And depending on the game, on D&D, I usually let you roll. In D20 games, I would usually let you roll for additional damage if you get a critical hit. Some other systems, I wouldn't do that. I would just double the attack power, or the damage dealt by the attack would be double. And I do that for spells in D20. I don't really think that when a spell is cast successfully, completely successfully, I don't think that the spell gets any sort of extra power other than, say, to multiply the damage by 2 or maybe by 1.5, depending on the spell. And there's an interesting when a spell fails, I do make you roll to see if it backfires or not. And that's because that has a lot to do with some of the very first games I played with my group at the time. When a spell backfired, it was almost always more fun than if the spell had actually successfully cast. One particular example I can think of is my sorcerer had a ferret for a familiar. and the party was fighting this dragon, and she was trying to summon the familiar to her aid, for a boost to her spellcasting abilities. This was a homebrew game, actually, and not only did the spell not cast, but it backfired, and it backfired in such a way that not one ferret was summoned, but close to 1,000 ferrets were summoned. And there were so many ferrets in the room that we were actually able to take the dragon down without sustaining a lot of damage to the characters. But then we had the problem of, okay, we have 1,000 ferrets. What do we do with them? Because they weren't going away. These were not magical familiar ferrets. They were like ferrets. And ferrets are not always nice, cuddly little animals. I happen to be of the opinion that ferrets are evil, but that's just based off of my experiences with them. So yeah, there are critical hits and fumbles, and they apply to spells, because I think it's more fun that way. Question 7. Do I get any benefits for wearing a helmet? Yes. You are not going to get much more benefit for wearing a helmet than having your head protected. If you fall and hit your head, you'll have your AC to sort of mitigate any injury you would suffer. Same thing if something were to fall on your head, or if you were to take a blow to the head. But not wearing a helmet, there's not going to be that much penalty if you aren't. And I generally assume if you're wearing some sort of magical circlet, I assume that to have magically the properties of a helmet. Now, if you're wearing a circlet or a crown that is not magic, and you're wearing that instead of a helmet, that doesn't really confer any benefits to you. Question 8. Can I hurt my friends if I fire into melee or do something similarly silly? Yes. You can hurt your friends if you fire into melee or do something similarly silly. If you, in the middle of combat, if you decide to try and use a grease trap to your advantage while people are still covered in grease or standing in the grease, if you decide to light that grease on fire, other people are going to be lit on fire too. Another thing, the same thing with the grease spell. If you are standing towards the back of the formation and you want to cast a spell at the enemy in a direct line, you want to cast magic missile or fireball or really any sort of projectile spell at the enemy any of your party is directly in the path of the spell, you are going to hit them too. And honestly, it doesn't make any sense to me why you wouldn't. So be careful. Question 9. Will we need to run from some encounters, or will we be able to kill everything? No, you will not be able to kill everything. You will need to run from some encounters, and I expect you to be smart enough to figure out which encounters you need to run from, even if your characters aren't. What? I'm making a video. Can you go sit? Thank you. Where are we? Oh, question 10. Level draining monsters, yes or no? No. I have never been a fan of level draining monsters. I do experience draining monsters. I am actually fairly generous with giving out experience. I like to give bonus experience a lot, and I also like to give action points. And usually, by spending an action point, you can recover a portion of the experience lost by an experience draining monster. Question 11. Are there going to be cases where a failed save results in PC death? Gosh, I hope not. I don't plan for there to be. But it has happened. And if it happens, then you just have to go with it. But it's small consolation. If it does happen, you will be able to make a new character, or you can probably pick one that I have pre-made that would have otherwise functioned as an NPC, if you so choose. Question 12. How strictly are encumbrance and resources tracked? If you're encumbered, you're encumbered. I don't really very strictly track inventory. If you don't have to have a list of all the spell components in your spell component pouch. If you have a spell component pouch, I expect you have the components for all your spells in that pouch. And I expect you to be somewhat capable of refilling that, either by foraging or by purchasing supplies in town. Same thing with like a toolkit, or if you have an adventurous kit. I assume in an adventurous kit that there's going to be a rope, a bedroll, a couple torches. So if you have an adventurous kit and you pull out a rope, I'm not going to really bug you about not having that on your list. Now, if you start treating toolkits or adventurous kits like a bag of holding, then I'm going to start tracking what's on your list much more carefully. And aside from toolkits and things like that, if it's not on the list, you don't have it. If you want to write in a journal and you have no ink, you cannot write in your journal. If you want to write in your journal and you have no ink and you didn't put your journal on the list, I may let you write something down and just assume it's in your other belongings. It depends on the significance of the information you want to record, I suppose. Number 13. What's required when my PC gains a level? Training? Do I get new spells automatically? Can it happen in the middle of an adventure, or do I have to wait for downtime? When you gain a level, you don't have to do anything. There is no training. Usually, when you level up, you will discover that one of the skills you have been using regularly is more easy for you now, or you have gotten better at it. Or you've gotten stronger, something to that effect. So no, you don't really need to go train in any skills that you've been using. If you want to train a skill that, or if you want to put points in a skill that you either haven't been using or that you have no ranks in, yeah, I guess I will make you go someplace and train that. Spells. Sorcerers get new spells automatically as they progress. To me, it doesn't make sense that someone with an innate ability to cast magic would need to go and study a spell. So a sorcerer will get it automatically, but the character won't necessarily know what that spell is. And probably won't discover it until he tries to cast some other spell. Or she. Wizards. You're going to need to study the spell before you get access to it, which is one of the reasons why I recommend to all my players that if you are a wizard, that you carry a spellbook with you that has at least the spells that you want to learn over the course of the adventure in it. Because that makes things quite a bit easier for you when you level up. And if you don't, then you'll have to wait until you come across the spell you want to learn, or until you come across a spellbook that has the spell you would like to learn in it. Clerics and druids, new spells come automatically. That's more of a divine power conferred to you by a deity or nature. You don't have to wait for downtime unless you want to train a skill, in which case you will. Number 14, what do I get experience for? You get experience for successfully completing an encounter. And there are usually multiple ways to do that. You might opt for combat, and you would get experience for defeating the enemies. You might choose to try and go around the bandit camp rather than going through it, or confronting the bandits directly when you don't need to. That would give you experience also. And I also I give experience for good role playing. I usually give you a little more experience for that. I tend to like to reward really good role playing with an action point over extra experience, because an action point I think is a little more valuable than experience. You can use it to re-roll if you had a bad roll of the dice. You can use it for a bonus on skill checks. You can, or actually, if you're crafting, or if you lose a level, you actually can convert an action point to experience. So if you're crafting, like a magic item, it doesn't drain. It doesn't drain away all your experience, and if you encounter an experience draining monster, it doesn't drain away, or all that experience that was drained away. You'll get usually all of it back. Question 15. How are traps located? Description, dice rolling, or some combination? Usually by description. If you have an ability that lets you find traps, or you have exceptionally good skill at spotting things. I usually won't make you roll a dice. If you have like a pole or some other object that you're holding out, searching in front of you, I won't make you roll a dice. But if you're just wandering, if you're just searching for a trap because you think one could be there, then there's probably going to be a few things that can trip you up. I might mention to a player with keen eyesight that there is a rock that looks like it should not be there. And to someone hunting for traps with a pole, he might knock aside a rock that appears, or an unnatural looking rock, and that triggers the trap. But if you're actively looking for a trap, like maybe caltrops or a tripwire or a pressure plate, I'm just going to mention a rock. I won't mention if something seems clear or not. If you're looking for a trap, I'll mention things. I might mention something that looks like a pressure plate, mention a rock, or really just describe the worn dirt path in front of you. But I won't say if something is free of obstacles or not, because it's really up for the player and the character to decide if they're going to step forward or not, and if they think everything is clear. Question 16. Are retainers encouraged, and how does morale work? Oh, I don't discourage retainers. If you have leadership and you want to have a retainer, I think that's great. You can have a retainer. I don't track morale. If you encounter a group of goblins, and they're getting pretty beat up, or you take out several of them, they're going to opt to run rather than continue the fight. If you're fighting an animal like a large bear, or something to that matter, if it gets injured severely, it's going to attempt to flee, regardless of any aggression it showed earlier. If you have a retainer, and the party has taken losses or is getting very beat up, the retainer's probably going to want to leave, and you're going to have to try and convince them not to. Oh, okay, you can have that. It's just cardboard. Dog had this. On the other hand, if you are using your retainer as a meat shield, or an idiot to take the blows for you, then your retainer is probably going to leave very quickly. Once they realize that you have no interest in their well-being beyond what they can do to keep you from getting hurt. Question 17. How do I identify magic items? Detect magic usually works. Some very powerful magic items might have a visible aura around them. But a sword that is sharper than usual, or an axe with a worn hilt and a blade that looks as though it has not seen battle even once. Those you would have to cast Detect Magic on, or have appraised by someone who is capable of identifying a magic item in order to discover that the item is a magic item and what the magical enhancement or enchantment is, I guess. Question 18. Can I buy magic items? Oh, come on. How about just potions? Yes, you can buy magic items in my game. Or in my games. They are fairly expensive. And usually are only pieces of jewelry. And they're not usually +2 to defense or anything like that. They're more things like a ring of climbing or a ring of feather falling. Or a necklace that grants you an at-will use of a spell you already know. But magic weapons, usually you aren't going to find any in the game unless it is something you need specifically as part of the main objective of the story, in which case you will find it, and generally you will have to go on a quest to find it. There was one time I really just felt like testing the players to see what they would do. They had to obtain a very specific type of sword, and it had to have been forged in a certain region with alchemical, or in a certain region. I mean, it had to be made entirely of alchemical silver. And they found that sword in a less than reputable merchant shop. And he, of course, wanted a very large sum of gold for it. And the players actually pooled their resources together and paid for the sword. And I wasn't expecting them to do that. I was expecting them to sort of say, well, this is ridiculous. I did not expect them to sort of bluff the merchant into lowering his price to something that they could cope with. Um, and I did reward them quite a bit after that. And there was because I had not been planning on them actually purchasing that sword when they came across it in the dealer shop. I had included a sword that met all the specifications of the sword that they would need to slay this very large shape-shifting creature. And I had included that in the treasure of a or among the treasure of a wizard they were directed to. Well, not really directed to. They were hired to stop from using the peasants for experiments. And instead of that sword, they found almost exactly the amount of gold that they had spent to purchase the sword they found in a chest in the wizard's keep. And it's almost exactly, it was a little bit less because I didn't want it to look like I was giving them their money back, but I also didn't want to punish them too much for for going what I had considered to be above and beyond the Call of Duty as a player. Potions. Yes, you can buy potions. The types of potions you can buy depends on the area in and where you look. Potions that have healing properties, usually you can only buy in an area with a monastery. Potions that have spell or spell-like abilities, you can find, well, probably about the same place you'd find you'd find some of the magic items. There's not like a Walmart of magic items, but like an enchanter shop. You would probably be able to find potions there. You probably could find, if not potions, someone capable of brewing them in a college devoted to the study of magic. You're not going to come across too many places that sell potions in my games. If you can make potions, that's great. Make them. If you can't, you're not going to come across it a lot. Potions that have spell effects will almost always be weaker when you buy them than what you could make yourself. Question 19. Can I create magic items? When and how? You can create a magic item whenever you have at least a day of downtime, preferably 2 days of downtime, because you have a day to craft the item and a day to recover. Making a magic item, you put a lot of your energy into it. You put a lot of yourself into it. And that is where the experience drain comes from. And I don't drain almost anywhere near as much experience for the items as recommended. Depending on the item, I may take up to 100 or 150. A really, really powerful item, I might take 200 for. But it's something that you could use to, or it's something that you can use an action point to regain. Well, if you've used your action points wisely, you can use your action point to regain that experience, or you would gain it back after a day of rest. I view it more as a penalty, or a temporary penalty to your experience, more than a permanent drain on your experience. You have to have the materials to create the item. You can't just sit down, or you can't come into town and have a few days of downtime and decide you want to craft a sword or a masterwork sword. You have to have the material and you have to have the skill for it. And when I say you have to have the skill for it, you don't have to have rank, or I won't make you take ranks in like blacksmithing or weaponsmithing or something like that, because quite frankly, I don't want to keep track of it. But if you have not indicated any ability to create any sort of, or to craft any sort of items at all, you can't go into town and decide you want to pay a blacksmith to use his forge to make a sword. You can pay a blacksmith to make a sword, but you cannot make the sword yourself. So you have to have at least the ability to make the item, and you have to have the materials to craft the item. And as long as you have the time, you can craft it. Question 20. What about splitting the party? Yes. I have on occasion split the party. Well, not directly. I have made situations where the party, I don't usually force the party to break up. On occasion, I have, and there's one reason, or there's one game I did that in, and I don't really recall why, but I will occasionally put the party in a situation where they would benefit from splitting up. But I leave that to them to decide. As an example, in a cave, with a group of 4 people, you may come across a branch in a tunnel, or an offshoot of the way that you're going, or of the path that you are on, that maybe is too narrow or too low for all of you to go down. And if someone opts to split and go that way, they usually aren't penalized for it. If you come to a fork, and there's 2 ways which you can go, and the group decides to split up, they often will meet in about the same place. Very rarely they don't. In a cave, in a dungeon, don't ever split up. That's my only warning. Don't ever split up if you're in a dungeon in one of my games. You might not survive, especially if you're splitting up into groups of less than 3. But I don't forcibly split the party usually. If you want to, if the party decides to split, I'm not gonna stop it. But my players are gently encouraged to really think about whether they want to split up or not, because things are going to get more difficult that way. Usually. At least for a short period of time before meeting back up. I think that's all 20 questions, and wow, I've gone on for quite a long time about this. If you actually sit through this whole thing, thank you. And if you shut it off at all, nothing against you. It's a really long video.